Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to CGTN. You're now watching the power of ideas when global governance comes to a new crossroads. I'm Li Qiuyuan, joining you from Beijing. As the world confronts climate change, conflict, and technological upheaval, questions of global governance have become more pressing than ever. Who sets the rules, and how do we ensure fairness? What vision can guide us toward a more just and inclusive international system? Against this backdrop, Chinese President Xi Jinping has put forward the Global Governance Initiative, which is China's proposal to reform and enhance global cooperation. This year also marks the 10th anniversary of his vision of extensive consultation and joint contribution for shared benefit in global governance, coinciding with the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. So, before we dive into our conversation, let's hear from distinguished international voices.
Well, the multilateral system that was engineered after the Second World War is clearly under pressure by aggression, including by P5 members, but also some very important challenges we are facing. And we have to find new ways to address these, and we also have to rebalance the system in accordance more to the reality of the 21st century, when in terms of demography and in terms of economic and cultural power, things have changed since 1945. And so the Global Governance Initiative is a very timely initiative to, alongside the Europeans, the Americans, the Latin Americans and the Africans, to try to improve the existing multilateral system and bring new ways of solving and preventing conflicts.
There are challenges, of course, such as applying international law on contentious issues of territorial integrity and divergent interests among nations within the various multinational organizations. Now, to those abroad who are concerned about China's growing economic power, military modernization and buildup, and geopolitical activism, consider China's global initiatives, especially the Global Governance Initiative. Actions, of course, speak louder than words.
So that sets the stage for a crucial conversation. And today we have three distinguished guests joining us. Please allow me to introduce you. Mr. Zhou Bo, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University. Ambassador Hodam Osman Abdi, Ambassador of Somalia to China. And last but not least, Mr. Wang Wen, Dean of the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University. Let's kick things off today on global governance and China's role in a changing world. I'd like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Zhou Bo, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University. With his extensive experience in international security, he will tackle some critical questions. As China rises, can it make the world less dangerous? And how might its long-standing principles shape global stability in the 21st century? Please welcome Mr. Zhou Bo.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor for me to talk about something that is actually not so easy to talk about. That is how to make the world less dangerous. Because I don't know how to make this world better. That is something very difficult to say. But whether China could make the world less dangerous, I think with the two wars going on, one in the Ukraine, another in the Middle East, people agree that this world is simply becoming more volatile. But there is one thing people do agree on, that is this world is now moving toward multipolarization. Multipolarization is the only word used at the Munich Security Conference this year. That is something we all agree, even by the United States, which is surprising. Because American Secretary of State Rubio said that the moment the unipolarity is not normal. This is really surprise for me, to hear someone like American Secretary of State would talk like that. So if this is the agreement, then what are the most important things for the 21st century? There are two things. One is America's decline. The second thing is China's rise. On the first question of America's decline, nobody disagrees that the United States has declined. The only question is to what extent. If you talk to Americans and say you have declined, they will not be happy. But if you say you have relatively declined, they cannot deny. Because this is the fact. If we think of that by the end of World War II, the US economy is basically half of the world. And 10 years ago, it is a quarter of the world. And now it is 1/7 of the world. So relative decline is also decline, right? Then we talk about China's rise. The problem about China is that China is wearing too many hats, and all of them are true. And this makes people confused. For example, China is definitely a developing country if its whole economy is divided by its population. But China is also the largest industrial nation on earth, the largest exporter in the world, right? The largest country with foreign currency reserve. All of them are true. So China confuses everybody. But then, the point is, whatever you talk about China, China is a global power now. In the past, you would hear a lot of African countries talking about China as a superpower. But now, many European countries are talking about China as a superpower. And this happened even to French President Emmanuel Macron at the Munich Security Conference that I attended this year. I was really shocked, because in the past, when the Western journalists talk to me, they say, okay, now we have a gentleman coming from another superpower. Okay, that is fine. But hearing Emmanuel Macron, president of a permanent member U.S. Security Council, talking about China as a superpower, that is something different. Then, what should China do, right? Because you are big, you have to show that greater responsibility. Even if that is a price you have to pay. Then, because of my background as a PLA veteran, I would focus on something that President Xi has talked about, that is a global security initiative. If you talk about global security initiative, then the best thing is to look at what PLA has been doing overseas. Not many things, just the 3 types of things: counter-piracy, peacekeeping, and disaster relief. That's all. But if you put all these things together, what kind of conclusions could you draw? They are all invariably the so-called military operations other than war, technically speaking. So that means they're all efforts in addressing humanitarian issues. And this is my hope for the PLA when PLA becomes even stronger than it is now. Why? Because if you just do humanitarian operations overseas, you don't kill many people. So that means what we have been doing is just to help other people, to play the role of a good Samaritan according to Bible. So if you help other people without killing people, then you are making this world less dangerous. Look at the United States. How many wars did they launch, even after the Cold War? And not all the wars are considered to be legitimate, even by Americans themselves, right? And these people cost us so many lives, so many resources. And this is not what China should do. You just do efforts in humanitarian to help people. So this is my best wish for my country, for the PLA in the future. The second thing is PLA should never, or China should never seek spheres of influence. People always make mistakes on 2 things. One is influence. Another is sphere of influence. They sound similar, but they are different. Everybody knows what is influence. But a sphere of influence is an area in which you try to use your dominant force to control others. This is not something that China really wants. Why? Because China's influence is already global. In any part of the world, in any corner of the world, that is why China should not want spheres of influence, which are difficult to build and are very hard to maintain. Look at American allies. The United States would believe, okay, having allies is most important. But the allies are just like cats, very difficult to hurt. You can hurt sheep, but you can hardly hurt cats, right? And the United States would spend 16% for NATO. So that is why Trump is frustrated, right? So because China's influence is global, China should never seek spheres influence, because China doesn't need spheres influence. If you doesn't need sphere influence, you don't need allies. You don't need allies. So the burden on yourself would not be great. And then finally, I hope China would always honor its time-honored policy of no first use of nuclear weapons. Right now, this world is becoming more dangerous. And some people say we are entering the second age of nuclear war, because Russia would from time to time give hints about using nuclear wars, right? And the United States is trying to modernize its nuclear weapons. China is also modernizing its nuclear weapons, right? As we have seen in Tiananmen Parade. But there is a difference. What is the difference? Having more nuclear weapons and increasing nuclear capability is different from using it, right? We have capabilities. We want to modernize our capability, but we are the only one that has pledged no first use of nuclear weapons. So that is why I said, when I was giving live comment at Tiananmen Parade in the CGTN, that when Donald Trump say, okay, the United States, Russia, and China should sit together to talk about nuclear disarmament, it's not possible. Because according to CIPRI, according to the Pentagon, we, by the end of last year, have 600 nuclear warheads. And United States and Russia, both of them have more than 5,000. So how can we sit together to talk about, reduction of nuclear warheads or China to increase in nuclear warheads, right? Neither is possible. But we can pledge, all of us, no first use. Why is that? Because even if you make a promise of not being the first one to use nuclear weapons, you still have a reassured capability of strike second. In other words, it would not cripple your capabilities. So that is China's proposal. We will still be able to see a nuclear-free world. And for all what I said, I believe with joint efforts of the Chinese government, Chinese PLA, and each one of you, China can indeed make this world less dangerous. Thank you.
Now, our next speaker is Ambassador Hodam Osman Abdi, Ambassador of Somalia to China. Drawing on her both personal and professional experiences, she will reflect on the Global Governance Initiative not just as policy, but as an idea that amplifies the voice of the Global South and centers ordinary people in global decision-making. Please welcome Ambassador Hodam Osman Abdi.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today on this stage. Every generation is handed a set of questions that it cannot avoid. For my generation, and for those of us from nations still finding our footing in a turbulent world, that question is this: what kind of global system do we wish to inherit? And what kind of system do we wish to build? 80 years ago, in the aftermath of 2 world wars, humanity tried to answer that question by creating the United Nations. For all its imperfections, the UN was an audacious act of imagination. It asked the nations of the world, large and small, rich and poor, powerful and fragile, to come together under one roof, guided by the hope that dialogue could replace war, that cooperation could replace domination. Now, 8 decades later, that original vision feels at once enduring and fragile. Enduring because the dream of peace and shared prosperity still inspires us. Fragile because the challenges we face, climate change, pandemics, digital divides, geopolitical tensions, and even the man-made famine crisis in Gaza have exposed the gaps in how we govern ourselves as humans. It is in this context that President Xi Jinping has introduced what he calls the Global Governance Initiative. Some will treat it as a policy, others will see it as geopolitics, but I want to treat it as what it truly is, an idea. And the beauty of an idea is that it cannot be monopolized. It belongs to whoever is willing to reflect on it, question it, and carry it forward. When your country has endured decades of conflict and outside intervention, when it has been battered by climate shocks, when it has faced the long journey of rebuilding institutions, you learn to appreciate the power of fairness. You learn why rules that apply equally matter, and you see why governance must be about people's daily survival, not lofty declarations. I remember visiting a rural school one day in Somalia, not that long ago. The children sat under a tree with no roof above them, no desks before them. Their only resource was a blackboard balanced against the trunk and the determination of a teacher who had returned after years of displacement. One little girl, Hafsa, came up to me afterwards, her notebook clutched like a treasure. She said, "I want to be a doctor one day so that I can help my mother." Her dream had nothing to do with politics. It was about dignity. It was about having a fair chance at life. And yet, behind her dream was a quiet question. Will the world around me give me that chance? Will there be peace so that I can study? Will there be investments so that I can find work in the future? Will there be a global system that recognizes my worth? Sovereign equality is not just about flags at the UN. It's about whether that girl's country has the voice to secure resources for her education. International law is not just about treaties, it's about whether rules protect her community from exploitation. Multilateralism is not just about diplomatic words, it's about whether collective action can address the droughts that threaten her future. When you put people at the center of the debate over global governance, it ceases to be abstract. It becomes personal. Now, I know what some of you might think. Isn't this just another initiative, another speech, another set of lofty principles? And maybe it is. But here's the thing. History has shown us that ideas, even when they seem idealistic, have a way of shaping our reality. The abolition of slavery began as an idea. The notion of self-determination for colonized peoples also began as an idea. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights began as an idea. At first, they were all fragile, dismissed as unrealistic, but because people dared to believe in them, they changed the course of history. So when a major leader puts forward a framework like the Global Governance Initiative, the real value is not in the technical details. It is in the questions it forces us to ask. Are we comfortable with the way the world is governed today? Are we willing to imagine a system that feels more representative, more inclusive, more just? Ideas matter because they make us restless with the status quo. They remind us that things could be different, that the world doesn't have to be the way it is. And for us in the Global South, these reflections feel especially urgent. For decades, our nations have contributed the least to global crisis, but suffered the most from them. We know what it means to live at the margins of decision making. We know what it feels like when systems built far away dictate the possibilities of daily life at home. But here's the opportunity. Initiatives like this give us a chance to step into the conversation, not as bystanders, but as participants. They are reminders that our voice matters, not because someone else allows it, but because history demands it. Somalia is the prime example of how unfair systems can hold back a nation blessed with abundance. Think about this. Somalia stretches across 3,336 kilometers of a coastline, the longest in mainland Africa. Those waters hold some of the most valuable species in the world, including bluefin and yellowfin tuna. Along the valleys of the Juba and Shabelle rivers, we have millions of hectares of arable land, enough not only to feed our people, but to help secure food for the entire region. Our economy is already anchored by millions of livestock, a sector that supports millions of families and makes Somalia one of Africa's largest meat and dairy producers. Beneath our soil, you'll find deposits of gold, tin, copper, oil, and natural gas. And above our soil, you will find skies with 360 days of sunlight and constant coastal winds, together giving Somalia some of the best renewable energy potential anywhere in the world. And then there is our greatest resource at all, our people. We are a nation where 70% of our people are under 30. They are young, very much like you, determined, ambitious, and ready to build a better future for all of us, only if they are given the chance. So here's the contradiction. Despite this abundance, more than 3 million children are still out of school. Millions of mothers and children like Hafsa lack access to basic health care. There is no justifiable reason for this. No moral, economic, or political argument that can explain why a country so rich in resources, so strategically located, and yet so young in its demographic strength, should remain this poor. This is why the principles of this initiative are not abstract to us. They are urgent. They remind us that fairness in global systems is not about charity, it's about justice. And they remind us that our children deserve the same chance to dream, to learn, and to thrive as all of the other children in the world. That is why, personally, I do not see the global governance system as a prescription, but as an invitation to reimagine, to rebalance, and to recommit. It doesn't give us ready-made answers. It doesn't tell us exactly how to reform institutions or solve disputes. But it places in front of us a mirror and asks, what do we want global governance to look like? And that question by itself is very powerful. As leaders, as citizens, and as members of one human family, we can choose to ignore it, or we can choose to engage with it, refine it, and shape it. Let me end where I began, with the power of an idea. Governance at its core is not about systems or acronyms, it's about people. It is about whether a farmer feels secure planting his crops. It is about whether a mother can find medicine for her child. It is about whether nations on the margins feel that they belong on the table. The Global Governance Initiative may not solve all these problems. I don't think any single initiative can, but it reminds us of something essential, that the future of global governance will not be written by inertia, it will be written by imagination. And so my hope is simple, that when the world looks back at this moment, when young people like Hafsa, clutching her notebook, step forward to lead, they will say that in 2025, we dare to ask the right questions. We dare to believe in the power of ideas. And that made all the difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Please be seated. Many thanks for sharing your perspectives on the Global Governance Initiative. Thank you. Now, our third speaker is Mr. Wang Wen, Dean of the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies and the Dean of the School of Global Leadership at Renmin University of China. Over the past decade, he has traveled the world sharing China's vision for global governance. And now he offers a personal reflection on that journey and what it reveals about China's ideas are resonating worldwide. Please welcome Mr. Wang Wen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. Actually, today I would like to share with you a personal story about global governance over the past decades. Let me show you a photo. This is me introducing China global governance philosophy to the global media at a press conference at a G20 summit, Turkey, in 2015. To be honest, there were very few media outlets at the time. And not many countries at that time believed that China should have had a global governance philosophy. People at the time were more skeptical of China. Many believed that China, having become the world's second largest economy a few years ago, would inevitably be caught in a fierce struggle with the existing hegemony, the United States, on the way to becoming the world's largest economy. Harvard professor, very famous professor, Graham Edison, even gave it a charming name, Thucydides' trap. 10 years later, I, with my colleagues, have traveled to over 100 countries to explain China's global philosophy. At the same time, China has held a lot of international summits to introduce global governance philosophy too. For example, the 2016 G20 Hangzhou Summit and the first Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation were held in 2017 with further summit in 2019 and 2023. And China also held several BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Xiamen, in Qingdao, in Tianjin this year, as well as the once sensitive dialogue between the Communist Party of China and the world. So, based on those so many summits, I heard a very important comment from a former foreign president who frequently visited China. He said once, over the past decades, the United States has launched dozens of major military operations to prove that U.S. remain the world's most powerful country, while China has held dozens of major summits to demonstrate its desires to work with the world to promote a new international system of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits. In September 2025, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Governance Initiative. This was another major initiative from China following the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative. These initiatives are the cornerstones of the China's foreign policy and the forerunner of its foreign strategy. They represent the vision of a rising civilization, a rising civilizational global power for the world, the hope to reverse the current slowdown in the global development, the deterioration in global security, the imbalance in global civilizational impact, and the deficit in global governance. Although they represent the vision to promote the building of a more just, and equitable global governance system and work together for a community with a shared future for mankind. So the deeper value of the four initiatives lies in their mutually supported organic wholes. Development is a foundation of the security, and security is a prerequisite for the development. And mutual learning among civilizations is a key of the mutual understanding and trust. And global governance reform is an institutional guarantee for achieving the first three goals. So this kind of the systematic thinking is urgently needed to address the challenges global complexity. So some Western media, they often keep the skepticism about China's the four initiatives, because those ideas are often stem from outdated zero-game thinking and institutional anxiety. So in fact, China's four initiatives are not meant to reinvent the wheel, but China wants to push the reform and improve the existing international system. So history has proved that the rise of a new great power is inevitably accompanied by the ideological contribution and institutional innovation. For example, the Western value system laid the foundation for the modern international relations. And Britain world system created by the United States in the 20th century established the post-World War II international economic order. So today, China's four initiatives respond to the widespread expectations of country in the global south for a fair and just international order. These further evaluate by the sharp itself, the sharp rise of favorable views of China's national image, and show in numerous global opinion poll in recent years. So the rise of a civilizational global power requires not only the economic and military strength, but also the ideological leadership and the agenda-setting power. So I think the four initiatives, like four-dimension coordinate, define a new paradigm for China's interaction with the world. No longer simply exporting goods and capitals, but sharing development experience, security concept, civilizational wisdom, and governance strategy. So the philosophy of diplomacy signals China's gradual transformation from a participant to a leader in globalization, and from a consumer to a provider of international public goods. So over the years, I have personally communicated with a lot of presidents and prime ministers from dozens of countries, including the French President Holland, the Turkey President Erdogan, and the Russia President Putin, and the late US President Jimmy Carter, as well as many international renowned scholars and experts. So more and more countries and international organizations have come to realize that China offers not only solution, but a significant framework and methodology for addressing global challenges. So in this regard, over the past decade, my colleagues and I have actively participated in a lot of international conferences, lectured at hundreds of universities, and published a lot of articles in hundreds of international media outlets. All of these reflects the Chinese people actively participation in leading the global governance and building a better life. In July 2025, I hosted the China-Latin American Human Rights Dialogue in São Paulo. Representatives from over 20 Latin American countries expressed a very strong desire to cooperation with China to enhance the future well-being of mankind. In August, I delivered a speech in Addis Ababa titled Prospects for China-Africa Relations in 2050, which was enthusiastically endorsed by participants from over 40 African countries. In September, I spoke at East Economic Forum in Vladivostok about the upcoming rights of Far East. The audience represents over 30 countries was thrilled. So this personal experience demonstrates that compared to 10 years ago, I no longer alone. None will struggle to find an audience. So this is because China governance philosophy and the vision for the global level is gaining increasing attention. So finally, I'd like to share a familiar picture of Tiananmen Center. Remember these two slogans on the left? It read, "Long live the People's Republic of China." On the right, "Long live the great unit of the peoples of the world." So this is China's strategic resolve and the goals the Chinese people strive for. So I believe that the great unit of the people of the world and the goal of building a community with a shared future to mankind will surely be achieved. This is my opinion. Thank you.
Welcome back. First of all, thank you so much for joining us here today to dissect and unpack the Global Governance Initiative. Let me start with you, Mr. Zhou. I find your speech earlier extremely intriguing. You talked about multipolarization. You talked about China's rise vis-a-vis America's decline, or relative decline, as some may prefer. But let's face it, the multilateral system we're facing today is under severe strain, right, with Cold War mentalities, with protectionism and other new threats. For example, a number of multilateral mechanisms, they're not working today. If you take a look at the WTO, its dispute settlement mechanism is practically paralyzed, and that's the crown jewel of the WTO. So this is the time we're living in today. Against that backdrop, how could China's principles such as sovereign equality, non-interference, or no sphere of influence, like you mentioned earlier, could really help rebuild or reform that multilateral system that was defined in 1945 and help it better fit today's reality?
Well, you have asked a cluster of so many important questions. So it's difficult for me to give a short answer. But basically, I think people have realized that the world has changed, right? And China needs to play a bigger role. So the question for us, really, every Chinese president is, what kind of role would you play? I'm most happy today to be sitting next to the ambassador of Somalia. Why is that? because from March of 2009 to 2015, I have been China's coordinator of counter-piracy in the Gulf of Aden, and that has a lot of things to do with piracy from Somalia. But why would some innocent fishermen become pirates in Somalia? It's not part of the reason is Somalia was going through a protracted internal war, but the other reason is a lot of Western countries actually dumped trash in the sea of Somalia. So the life of the fishermen became endangered. So that was one of the fundamental reasons. Why should you, dump your dustbin, in the sea of a faraway country called Somalia, right? And that is why China has been trying to help ever since 2009 in counter-piracy. Now we still maintain a flotilla of 3 ships, anytime, at any given time, in the northern Indian Ocean, which has the 3 most important, international strait: Bab el-Mandeb, Hormuz, and nearer to our home, the Strait of Malacca. So that is why Chinese Navy now is no longer fighting piracy, but it is there to safeguard the security of the critical international sea lane. That is a kind of public good. So when we come to this question of what kind of public goods China can provide, China really can provide a lot. Just now, people talking about President Xi Jinping's 4 global initiative. They sounded abstract in the beginning. But if you look at what China is doing, what PLA is doing overseas, and how China actually has spent billions of dollars in the Belt and Road Initiative, it is not abstract, right? Some foreigners describe China's Belt and Road Initiative as a trap. My answer is very simple. Okay, would you spend billions of dollars to lay a trap? Would you? This is not lip service. It's billions of dollars. Yeah, that is welcome by more than 140 countries. And why this initiative is so popular? Because it tries to address the fundamental problem that in global governance, that is a lack of good infrastructure. Yeah, as Ambassador has just mentioned, right? And where did we have this good idea? Because it came from China's own experience through reform and opening up, which in Chinese, everybody know, 要想富先修路. In English, I have translated into better roads lead to better life, right?
That's a good translation.
Yeah.
Now, Ambassador, let me also bring you in. You earlier talked about the voice of the Global South. If you look at the Global Governance Initiative, it also calls for amplifying the Global South and narrowing the gap between the North and the South. But if you look at the gap, where has been the gap between reality and aspiration be most evident? And in which areas do you see meaningful progress?
I think that's a very important question to raise. The case of Somalia perhaps actually demonstrates that large gap and where it exists most evidently. A country like Somalia, blessed with so much abundance, is often encouraged to invest more in education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, in job creation for the youth. However, it is almost impossible to access the necessary financing to fund such projects. A country like Somalia needs to pay higher premium on loans where wealthier nations don't. And these are called risk premiums, yes? At the same time, a country like Somalia has extreme difficulties in accessing the necessary finances to implement projects, whereas, in a very funny coincidence, if we want to access funds to create a plan for a project, that would be more easily available. So it's easier for you to plan, but when it comes to the implementation, it's hard to tap into those funds. However, I believe currently, there are initiatives that are trying to address this issue. People are calling for special drawing rights for African nations. We want more representation. And I think these are very positive new things that are happening that could allow this gap to decrease.
And over to you, Mr. Wang. You have personally witnessed China's ideas, China's vision gaining global traction in recent years. How would you assess the international response to China's newly proposed GGI, the Global Governance Initiative? How do you think the international community think about China's call for upholding international law uniformly, resisting double standards, and ensure that multilateralism is being practiced in real terms?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because I think international societies, when they observe China, I think it's a gradual change, evolution process. For example, in 2013, when President Xi launched the initiative of Belt and Road, and there are very few countries they are interested in or know the initiative. You know, the first systematic essay on a Belt and Road initiative started in 2015, 2 years after President Xi launched the initiative of Belt and Road. So that means there was a need time to promote the international societies to interested in China initiative. So that's why I think CGTN as well as the international media are very, very important. You have to promote China's initiatives, reputation, right? And then I think for the different region, different countries, they have different viewpoints on China initiative when they know the China initiative. For example, for West, a lot of Western strategists, they always, as I said right now, they are skeptical of China's initiative. Because in their mind, they are influenced deeply by the international relations theory. Because in terms of international relations theory, when a rising power, the power is sure to be won't be a new hegemon. So when China shows such a peaceful join a cooperative initiative, most of them they don't trust China initiative. They still use their mind, their logic to imagine China's future. But so I think that need time. So let time prove they're wrong, their wrongness. But for most of the countries of global south, I think that they are welcome China initiative. They are involved in China initiative. For example, the Belt and Road initiative, there are more than 150 countries members or those countries signed MOU with China. But I think it's need time. So China, it's a very typical country with a long-term reason philosophy. So we keep patience. We have a long thousands of years civilization. We have time. So just let time prove China peaceful strategy and the long-term design for the future.
Right. And beyond all the slogans, the Global Governance Initiative is also about values. It's also about trust and the ability to address real-time challenges, right? Mr. Zhou, the Global Governance Initiative also talked about people-centered governance. Can you put things into perspectives for us? What does it entail in practical terms?
Well, I think if you look at the world today, the fact is China is a socialist country. There aren't many socialist countries in the world, so we are actually having that kind of ideology is somewhat different from those countries in the West, right? But even when the West talk about the West, the so-called full Western democracy actually aren't many countries just like that, right? And this world now has changed to the extent that, very interesting to tell you, at the Munich Security Conference, one of the conclusions is that not only is the world becoming less Western, but the West itself is becoming less Western. Yeah? If you go to two cities, one is London, another is Rotterdam in the Netherlands. These are the two cities where 1 in 3 people is born overseas. So now if you go to London and you see a group of pupils, yeah, led by the teacher, well, they're not all white boys, white girls, right? Definitely there are a lot of Asian faces, right, including people like us, yeah, from East Asia, or definitely there are people coming from India, Pakistan, or Bangladesh. How many people are there? I remember 10 years ago, I was told by New Scotland Yard, actually that is the police department, right? They told me at that time there was 1.5 million British Pakistanis. What about the British Indians, British Bangladesh? Yeah. So all the people now are really, really mixed. So that is why how you need, in spite of this kind of differences in ideology, to contact the people, to know what they are thinking. And that is why I'm a Chinese military veteran. Of course, I'm a party member, right? And so I went to the West. I talked to the elite people in the British clubs where, okay, everything is decorated really, really like, the most luxury places in the world. If you want to go to a club, then you go to London, to see all these places. People welcome you. People would want to understand better, what China thinks about the world. That is why I actually published a book called Should the World Fear China in April in London. Well, it's a collection of what I wrote in the last 12 years, but I could never expect that it was so well received. With all more than 10 international top media asking me for interviews. And I even got a book review in Foreign Affairs magazine, So it shows how important China today is. And today, what is the value of each one of you? That is because you are Chinese. And today, Chinese people's ideas really matter to this world. So that is why we definitely have a responsibility on our shoulder. This kind of responsibility sometimes is heavy, but that is the price you have to pay as a major power. And today, this is a role for China and for each one of you.
Big country comes with big responsibilities, and China has always been calling for joint contribution, joint consultation for a shared future. Ambassador, to you, what concrete measures or projects or reforms would you recommend to ensure that more countries are co-creators in this initiative instead of just participants?
Well, thank you. I think having a seat at the table is first and foremost the most important thing. The recent efforts in which we appreciate China's support, where the African Union is able to join the G20 summit, is a revolutionary step forward that brings Africa to the table, whereas we used to be, in most cases, one of the subject items to be discussed, whereas now we're part of the agenda setters. If we can have similar initiatives where voices of the Global South, voices of countries like Somalia are able to sit at decision-making tables, if we are able to sit at the IMF, at the World Bank, at such financial institutions where detrimental decisions about who gets financing for what, how, and when are made, if we have better say, then I believe we will have better effect and a better way to actually implement the kind of change that we hope to see in the future.
And over to you, Mr. Wang. Which cooperation projects or projects would you say might deliver tangible results that align with the GGI?
Wow, too many.
Name a few for us.
Actually, I think they are from, generally speaking, the most impressive project are from two levels. Or two parts. One is those big infrastructure in most of the global south. I can guarantee, in most of the global south, there are a lot of big infrastructures constructed by the China company, especially in Africa. When we're seeing in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, most of the biggest infrastructure, for example, the ports, the railway, high speed, tall building, are all built by the China company. I think it's really changed the daily life of the local people. And on the other part, is about I think more useful and feel not enough report. I mean the infrastructure park, because there are overseas there are more than 150 industrial park of China. So this some kind of China development model. We just have a special zone and attract more and more companies in this park, and then especially in those developing country, there are more and more Chinese industrial park, and then push the local economic growth and solve the jobs. I think this is very useful. So I think so-called global development initiative is not only a slogan, but also the implementation policy.
Mr. Wang also earlier mentioned whenever China put forward an initiative, the West remains skeptical. Let me put that to you, Mr. Zhou. How are you looking at this? Because China has now put forward 4 global initiatives, one on security, one on development, one on civilization, and then one on global governance. Why is China doing this? What sort of big picture does China have in mind? And should the West be fearful about it?
Well, I think there is a great difference in Chinese mentality and the Western mentality. I understand why they have some suspicions or even doubts, because this is not the way they do things. Because normally, if in the Western countries, if they want to put forward an idea, they need to first of all present a concept paper in which they're going to write down a number of things that would tell what is the purpose and who is going to do it and how much money you're going to spend on it, right? So yeah, if you look at China's proposals, apparently we do not have these kind of components now, but do not underestimate China's initiatives. Why? Because this is exactly the Chinese way of thinking. First, we have an idea, and then, with our efforts, with our energy, it will start to snowball. Yeah. For example, in China, we talk about China Dream, right? Yeah. So for the West, they cannot understand how could you just talk loudly about your dream. But for us, it is something very much tangible. It's not just a dream, right? And then the China Dream, gradually it becomes what? The great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And what is the timeline? 2049. And what PLA is going to do? Become world-class military by 2049. Gradually, things come out like this. So I think that China does have such, good intention to change the world, because right now the world is almost broken, right? So people would look around to see, okay, who might have better ideas and who would take the lead. China today is just too big to hide yourself behind a tree, right? So therefore, you need to do something. Look at the difference between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration. During the first Trump administration, basically, the American government would not talk about any cooperation with China, except sometimes talking about climate change. Of course, that is understood, because without climate change cooperation, everybody will die, right? So that is common sense. So I'm not so sure how long this kind of turbulent period will last. I think it will probably take another 10 to 20 years. But if I look at the United States, I think the United States is improving. Why? Because during the first Trump administration, they were panicking. They suddenly say China is a strategic competitor, right? But now it seems that they are coming down a little bit, right? Because they are walking out of their own fantasy of being the city upon the hill. This is nonsense, right? There is only one city upon the hill. That is in essence, the broken, empty temple, which is full of tourists. That's the only place. Yeah, city up on the hill. It's windy, it will not be comfortable, so better come down to the hill to stay with everyone else.
There's an example that I often like to invoke when people start talking about China's ambitions and, you know, the skepticism about China's rise. Over 600 years ago, China had the largest fleet in the world at that time. It was led by Admiral Zheng He. He crossed the Indian Ocean and went to many countries along the Indian Ocean, including Somalia. So 600 years ago, Zheng He came to our shores. He visited 5 cities along our coast, all the way from the north in Sayla to Mogadishu in the south. What did he bring? Unlike many explorers of his time, he did not bring guns, and he did not bring plunder, he did not bring slavery, and he did not loot our resources at the time. He rather brought with him friendship, he brought trade, and he was answered in the same way. The Ajuran Kingdom, which was located in Mogadishu, today's Somalia's capital at the time, was the first African kingdom at the time to send a diplomatic gift to the Chinese emperor at the time. So Africa answered that friendly call with another friendly call. We sent what in China they call qiling, but we know it's called the Changdinglu, right? It's the giraffe. We sent giraffes and incest, and we sent Wuxiang Moyao. These are special gums that are only found in Somalia. We sent them to Yongle Huangdi, which is the emperor at the time, and we established a relationship between China, Africa, and the Arab world through trade, friendship, and cooperation. Not looting, not slavery, and not conquering. China had the capacity at the time. If it wanted to, it could have done that, but it didn't. So let's think back to today. If they didn't do it at the time, why would they do it today when the world is even more civilized than it was hundreds of years ago?
A vivid testament to China's long-standing principles, China's philosophy, its mentality, right? Peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation. Thank you very much. Quite a vivid example. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your input. And guys, it's now time for Q&A. So if you have any questions for our guests, feel free to raise your hands. My colleague will get you a mic. This young lady over here.
And I got a question to Ambassador Zi that I wonder, as you mentioned that fairness is not charity but justice, and I wonder that for young people like us, what small steps can we take to, whether on campus or in our communities, to maybe we can to reflect the idea of justice to, in our way, interact with others. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I think the question itself inspires me. If I may look back at my personal experiences at university, one of the things that I love to do with my friends is to volunteer around the city. We used to go to the rural areas and spend a day with the preschool children, primary school children, children in a small rural area that really don't have that much exposure, who really don't have really big ideas of what development is or what they could be in the future. But inspire them, give them an idea bigger than their imagination that they could aspire to. Sometimes we used to go to the orphanages. These are children that lack, paternal or maternal care. But if you, spend a day with them, allow them to enjoy a fun atmosphere, forget their circumstances, know that in the future they will be able to depend on themselves and be parents to other children, I think these are great ideas. At the same time, I think you have a lot of student unions here at the university, yes? So these student unions are also important platforms where you can exercise what you will be doing in the future in the society. So how you govern each other, how you support each other, the initiatives that you come up with in the school campus will prepare you for the future that we hope that you will build together with the youth from all around the world.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Here I got a question for Mr. Zhou. As you just mentioned, China doesn't need a sphere of influence. And as young people who are trying to understand global affairs, how should we think about influence in a more constructive and positive way?
This should not be a very difficult question because influence is positive for whoever who can generate this kind of influence, right? So the difference between influence and the sphere of influence is really, really confusing sometimes. Let me put it this way. Does China already have spheres of influence? Some people would point out to say, okay, Southeast Asia is China's backyard, right? Sometimes you hear people say something like that. No, it's not. Why is it not? First of all, in Southeast Asia, there are American allies, the Philippines, Thailand, and there are countries who have a territorial disputes with China, quite a few of them in the South China Sea, starting from Vietnam to Malaysia to Brunei to the Philippines, right? So Southeast Asia, in spite of its good historical connectivities with China, cannot be described so easily as China's sphere of influence. Then we move on to Northeast Asia, right? Japan would have some troubled relationship with China, and the DPRK won't listen to China when you want it to denuclearize, right? So how can you say that, okay, Northeast Asia is China's sphere of influence? Then we come to South Asia. China's relationship with India is also complicated. So the only place where China has a relatively smooth relationship actually is in the Central Asia. But that is Russia's traditional sphere of influence, right? Because it was part of the Soviet Union. So that is why China would very much focus on developing economic relationship with these countries rather than, developing too many things in this area. So in China's periphery, there are no China's spheres of influence. So if we look beyond China's periphery, of course it is more difficult for you to establish spheres of influence. And what is the need? Yeah, you don't have such a need because China doesn't have a global ambition to police the whole world. Yeah, so that's what I mean in the beginning. Because China's influence is already global, everybody knows how important China today is. Chinese products are everywhere, right? So you don't need to have this kind of sphere of influence. But remember one thing that is most important. Should China fill in America's vacuum? Yeah, sometimes people say China wants to fill in America's vacuum. Oh, because America is withdrawing from the rest of the world. Yeah, the United States is retrenching. My answer is, don't try to fill in this vacuum. These vacuums probably are just traps, right? So, for example, in the Middle East, yeah, China helps Iran and Saudi Arabia, yeah, to reach a kind of agreement. And I doubt if there is at all a so-called American vacuum in the Middle East. There isn't. The United States cannot leave, the Middle East just because of Israel. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here. Thank you very much. And that's going to do it for this special CGTN program, Powers of Idea. Once again, many thanks to our fantastic guests for sharing your analysis, your insights, and perspective. And thank you, our awesome audience, for staying with us the whole time. And to you who are watching us online or on TV, we appreciate your company. Until next time, bye for now. Have a great one.